Hello, today we are going to talk about Central Asia, geopolitics of Central Asia, or this crucial region of the wider Eurasian continent. And indeed, if you look at the history of Central Asia from ancient period to medieval to early modern or even modern period, you see numerous instances, historical developments essentially, indicating that highlighting the region's importance in global history. Indeed, numerous invasions by nomads uh, from Central Asia, and by Central Asia, I don't really mean only five countries which are generally regarded as being part of this traditional region, but sort of a region much wider geographical scope. You say that in a certain sense, in a way, the region served as a as a driver of numerous historical processes across the Eurasian continent, especially from the Mediterranean, Black Sea, to the Eurasian steppes in the north and to the borders of China. So the heart of Eurasia served as a driver of numerous historical processes across throughout history, essentially. So Central Asia also has served as a major highway um, for Silk Roads, for trade in various commodities, and connected such regions as huge Chinese market with the Indian market, with the trade routes and markets in the Eurasian steppes, and obviously the Middle East. So it connected essentially four big uh, economic centers of the Eurasian continent, and obviously the rulers of various empires and nomadic powers themselves always vied for control over this important highway. So Central Asia retained this role to the modern period, and in the present time, you see how Central Asia, consisting traditionally of five countries, should actually be regarded as a region comprising even more than simply five countries, including Afghanistan, perhaps even parts of Western China, and surely parts of modern day Mongolia. So Central Asia, in a sense, is a much bigger space of essentially steppe land and various peoples who essentially are interconnected culturally, economically, and so on, or were linked to each other throughout history. So Central Asia is key to understanding what is happening um, in the modern geopolitics. Indeed, the region is bordered by China, Russia, and to the south by Iran. But you see that not only these three countries are striving to expand their influence over this vital region, but there are also the US, the EU, Japan, to a certain extent India, or even South Korea, who are now trying to sort of increase their footprint through investments and development of infrastructure or cultural ties or trade ties, commercial ties with Central Asian countries, and especially Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. So Central Asia is in a way vital because it serves as a transit route and also as a source of vital energy resources. With Central Asia controlled by any single power, which is, I think, an impossible task for the moment, because you need to be essentially you need to possess enough resources to control such a wide area, and you need to be culturally attractive too, which is in the modern period very difficult task to accomplish. And if you look at how Central Asian countries are striving to diversify their foreign policy, their respective foreign policies, it is pretty much clear that none of those countries will be easy to dominate, as, for example, Moscow or generally Russia has done since mid-19th century till the collapse of the Soviet Union in early 1990. So what we have nowadays is the emergence of a new world order, and I would like just to show how this new world order, or some elements of the new world order, are clearly being seen through what's happening in Central Asia. So that's essentially about Russia and China trying to expand their influence in the region. Both are seen as competitors. They might indeed be as such, but the thing is that neither Russia nor China see each other as existential threats to each other, so they prefer to cooperate, to compete too, but at the same time to downplay the differences which might arise from, which obviously might arise from such competition. So for them, crucial thing is to keep Central Asia shut from non-regional actors. In that sense, it's a very important development, because it really helps to understand the concept of regionalism, which is emerging across several regions of Eurasia, from South Caucasus to South Asia to Southeast Asia, or Central Asia. So the idea is to essentially allow the region be dominated solely by those countries which are neighboring, which would neighbor on this specific region. So in Central Asia's case, that's Russia and then China. Obviously, when it comes to keeping outside powers at bay, those powers are mostly Western powers. So the United States, or the EU, or even NATO as an institution. So those actors are really the actors which Russia and China are trying to keep away from Central Asian region. And that's the idea of regionalism, again, as I said, which is emerging essentially in various regions across the Eurasian supercontinent. So the idea of keeping outside, well, non-regional powers at bay is also a very interesting aspect of great power competition, because that literally follows what the logic of Russia's and China's foreign policies across the or throughout history, essentially. And it also sort of follows the logic of other big powers, even the United States, which always try to keep at least entire North America and parts of South America away from outside powers. In that case, those were European powers. So I think with Central Asia now in focus, we are clearly witnessing some elements of the future world order, which will be more disorganized than it is nowadays, but in a way, for bigger actors such as Russia and then China, Now, that order actually might be more profitable and more more beneficial in a way that it will allow essentially non-regional actors be essentially being standing away from those crucial regions such as Central Asia. So when it comes to Central Asia itself, you have Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan playing a major role. Obviously, Uzbekistan is more important when it comes to the population resources, also when it comes to energy resources, natural resources overall, but also because it really occupies the wealthiest part of the most profitable, wealthiest part of Central Asia. That's the Fergana Valley, and which extends to other countries too. But again, as I said, is mostly located in Uzbekistan. So with Uzbekistan on your side, you essentially can claim bigger influence in Central Asia, and that's I think what Russia and China are trying to do when it comes to courting Uzbekistan and then Kazakhstan and trying to influence the entirety of Central Asia. Obviously, this also raises the question of how Russia and China will manage their competition. As I mentioned, there is a concept of regionalism, but there is also an understanding that as long as Russia and China are competing and are rivals and even enemies in certain cases to the West, their willingness to cooperate with each other to downplay differences actually will only increase. So the idea of Russia and China eventually colliding in Central Asia is, I think, premature, and there is essentially no major development which would indicate that these two countries would openly rival each other in the future. However surprising that might sound, but for Russia, Chinese influence in Central Asia is not as fundamentally offensive, fundamentally troublesome as the Western influence in Ukraine, wider Black Sea region, or South Caucasus. So that's a major difference, and for many that might sound surprising, but from the Russian perspective, Chinese are not really trying to change Russian state structures, the model of governance, or even expulse Russia from Central Asia or other parts of what was formerly the Soviet Union or the Russian Empire. So the Russians are very sensitive to that. They might be exaggerating the threat emanating from the West, but they clearly see that those are not challenges coming from China, at least at the moment. And when they compare that with what the West is proposing and expanding when it comes to its influence, Russian politicians are making a clear choice in favor of maintaining very good ties with China.